So, the most common questions I get asked is if I've seen blank anime or for anime recommendations. But trying to categorize all of the anime I have ever seen is absolutely impossible. And with my current schedule limitations of monthly uploads, I won't be able to cover even a fraction of the good anime out there. And making a ranked top 10 list has always felt weird to me. If there are 10 good shows and I enjoyed all of them, then why does it matter which one of them is the best? I don't know, I guess I just feel kind of like the two cakes guy. For example, if you ask me, what is the best Studio Ghibli film? Then I would tell you that Spirited Away is Hayao Miyazaki's magnum opus. It's the most universal and beloved film the studio has produced and is overall excellent. But if you ask me what my favorite Studio Ghibli film is, I will tell you that it's Kiki's Delivery Service. Not because I think Kiki's Delivery Service is better than Spirited Away, but I like it more anyway. It's my personal favorite. So with all of that being said, this list is 10-ish of my favorite anime from the 2010s. Also, I'm not an anime purist, so there are going to be a couple of American animated shows on this list. Anime, it's more of a feeling, and I'd rather include anime-adjacent shows on this list than not recommend them at all just because they aren't literally the definition of what anime is. Alright, so before we start, I'll be honest, when scripting this video, I originally tried to tackle all of the anime that I liked from the period of 2010 to 2019, which in hindsight was clearly a fool's errand and an obvious sign of hubris. So instead of doing that monstrosity of an idea, it's just my 10-ish current personal favorites, and as a compromise, a couple of honorable mention subcategories. Because the 2010s spans a decade of media, there's a lot of anime that I saw near the beginning and midpoint of the 2010s that I liked at the time, but have grown out of and would feel really weird recommending them to someone now. Or shows that I thought were good or fine, but I couldn't talk at all at length about them with another person. In layman's terms, these would be C tier. And then over here, these are the series that I still think are pretty good or wanted to talk about at least one thing about them, but for whatever reason, like I've already talked about them or I'm planning to talk about them in the future, I had to cut them for time. I don't know, I might turn these into a bonus video or something. And now for a lightning round of good relaxation comedy anime to wind down to after a long day. These anime are great and perfect for what they are, but I just don't have anything to say about them because of their laid-back nature. So, Nichijou 2011, 8 out of 10. It's like a slice-of-life anime that had an animation budget that was through the roof. The slapstick comedy is some of the best I've ever seen with how over-the-top it is. I would recommend checking out a couple of clips to see if it's your thing, like Yuko trying to order a coffee and having no idea what any of the names mean, or the school president fighting a deer, or Mio body slamming her friend into the ground because she accidentally found one of her hand-drawn BL manga. If it had just a little bit more sincere moments or overarching plot, it would get a 9. Shirokuma Cafe, 2012, 6 out of 10. A polar bear runs a cafe and shenanigans ensue. I love the way the animals are drawn and the way Shirokuma speaks in this incredibly soothing tone, and this was my sleepy time treat for a long while. Today's menu for the Emiya family, 2018, 6 out of 10. The Fate franchise made a cooking anime, and it slaps. You don't really need to know anything about the mini-murder war premise of the Fate series to enjoy it, though it definitely makes seeing all these characters achieve domestic happiness hit real different. Honestly, I kind of wish more franchises in general took this approach of what is essentially making a weird AU with the same cast but a totally different genre. Skullface bookseller Honda-san, 2018, 6 out of 10. It's a comedy anime about a skeleton working at a bookstore, and all of the characters are drawn wearing some kind of weird mask. I like skeletons, I like books, bada bing, bada boom, I like this. Whew. Okay, lightning round over. Let's start this for real. Jellyfish Princess, 8 out of 10. Tsukimi is an illustrator and jellyfish fanatic who recently moved into Amamizukan, an apartment building in Tokyo where the tenants are only otaku women. Otaku in this case, I should mention, just means fanatic and is not specifically related to being obsessed with anime. Banba, for instance, is a train otaku. Tsukimi is a little socially awkward and has a hard time being around stylish, popular people, which becomes a problem when she meets what is her idea of a perfect woman. Tall, confident, beautiful, and also a boy, and he turns her life upside down. As a heads up, this is not an ugly duckling story where Tsukimi gets a makeover and a man and that's all she needed to make her happy. It's more like she makes some new friends, has some new life experience, and ends up learning more about what she wants to do with her life. The main cast doesn't conform to society's expectations of female beauty standards or what are considered typically feminine interests. And it's fantastic to see an anime with a cast of female leads that not only have unique face and body shapes, but are in their early to mid-30s, and that don't need to change to be happy. The fact that Kuranosuke's love of fashion make him the most traditionally feminine out of all of the Amars is kind of the point, being that it's a major middle finger to his dad and societal norms. Unfortunately, their apartment building is under threat of being demolished, so Tsukimi's friends and the other tenants all work together to participate in a fashion show to raise money to stop the demolition of their home. One of my favorite things about the anime is watching the Amars work together to accomplish something that they couldn't have on their own. And in the manga, they basically start their own small business together. The manga is really good. You should really give it a chance if you've already seen the anime. It was finally completed a couple of years ago. The manga ends up going more into depth about fashion design and the problems in the fashion industry, such as companies destroying their own products instead of putting what they can't sell into charity shops where they could be worn by poor people. I feel like I should warn that this anime is over 10 years old, and much like Ouran High School Host Club, because it was progressive and groundbreaking about gender expression during the time it was made, it talked about a lot of aspects with the language used at the time, which through a modern lens is really jarring to see and hear. And the anime steps a little too close to the assault of men played for laughs, that I would feel weird if I didn't bring it up at all. It's a problem in the manga, but one that the anime made worse by choosing to run with it, as a way to provide closure prematurely for this character's arc because the anime wasn't going to get a follow-up, which was a choice that they made that was bad and that I don't agree with. If you've never heard of Jellyfish Princess before and you're interested in watching it, I would try not to hold it to the standards of modern media. Oh my god. How do I even begin to explain JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? Look, if you haven't watched JoJo and it doesn't look like it's your thing, I highly recommend finding a friend who has already seen and likes JoJo and watching it with them instead. JoJo is infamous for JoJo poses, high fashion, body horror, and being unexplainable out of context. And that experience, in my opinion, is best enjoyed with a friend. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is an extremely long-running series. Hirohiko Araki started writing Part 1, Phantom Blood, back in 1987, and Part 8, JoJolion, in 2011, which he is currently still writing. That's 30 plus years of the same manga. But the manga and anime are split into several different arcs, with each arc starting a new narrative and new protagonist from the Joestar family bloodline. So Part 1, Phantom Blood, takes place in the late 1800s in England and features the first JoJo, Jonathan Joestar, fighting against King Sexy Man Vampire Dio Brando with sunlight energy. But Part 2, Battle Tendency, is set in 1938 New York, with Jonathan's grandson Joseph Joestar fighting against the sexy Pillarmen with sunlight energy. And then Part 3, Stardust Crusaders, begins in 1988 with Joseph's grandson, Jotaro Kujo, going to Egypt to save his mom, and also fighting some sexy men. Let it be known, if there is ever a sexy man that needs to be defeated, one of the Joestars will surely be on the case. So Part 3 is largely considered by fans to be the major turning point for the series, as it introduces the new permanent fighting system. Stands act as the manifestation of a stand user's fighting spirit, and their abilities range from being able to punch things, or slap a hole in reality, or make food that cures your tummy ache through terrifying body horror. Parts 1 through 3 are, they're fine, They were written over the course of 1987 to 1992. They're not exactly up to the standards we've come to expect from modern shonen. From a historical perspective, I think it's really interesting to see Jonathan start out as what is basically a Fist of the North Star clone, and how Araki's storytelling improves and how his art style slowly changes from these hyper-masculine buff dudes in crop tops into these slender, willowy, pretty boys. in crop tops. And with that in mind, I think it's really interesting, but I wouldn't go in expecting a masterpiece. For me, and also for a lot of people, Part 4 and 5 are where JoJo starts to get legitimately good, and I actually became emotionally invested. However, I don't think I would have been able to appreciate how far Part 4 had come if I hadn't already ground through what the earlier parts were like. Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable, is a much smaller scale story than all the other previous parts, and is about the sleepy little town of Morio and trying to catch a rampant serial killer who systematically destroys anyone who gets in his way. Part 5, Golden Wind, is also excellent. Taking place in Italy, the main character, Giorno Giovanna, joins a gang because his dream is to become a mafia boss and take drugs off the street. And I'm looking forward to the anime adaptation of Stone Ocean, which, hold on, let me check my notes from my brother, is about the American prison system. Cool! I love learning about the American prison system. The pros of watching JoJo are that you will understand a lot of references. The cons, however, are that you can never go back. There is only life pre and post knowing JoJo. Bee and PuppyCat, 9 out of 10. Bee and PuppyCat is an American animated web series. You can watch it for free right now on YouTube, and you should because the first season is only a little over an hour. Not including the pilot episode, which isn't included in the official compilation for some reason, maybe because it's stylistically different and not quite as pretty. In the original pilot episode, Bee is a little bit more taller and slender, and I like that they changed it so that she's more plump in the final version. Each episode is split into 2 parts, the first half consisting of Bee hanging out in the normal world, and then the second half is working a temp job with PuppyCat on these little Mario Galaxy-esque mini-planets. The surface level aesthetics are clearly inspired by the magical girl genre, like the talking animal mascot and Bee's transformation sequences. I mean, Toast's voice actor is the original Deke dub voice of Sailor Moon, and I basically lost my mind the first time when I heard her speak.
I have been bar hopping, learning wild man fighting techniques. Major Bumsville, oh, I'm so late!
Aaron Hansen from Game Grumps also has a couple of minor speaking roles, which I love because it's a bit like the generation of people who grew up on anime like Sailor Moon are now coming together to make their own shows in response to that. But below the surface aesthetics, there is this underlying constant looming pressure of adulthood pushing down on the cast, internally and externally. Bee is just barely managing to pull together rent. Her apartment doesn't have a kitchen, and the whole reason that she's working these temp jobs is because she was fired from her previous job. Bee and PuppyCat does a really good job of addressing those fears that I think a lot of young adult people have of not growing up fast enough and being left behind by your friends who are moving forward in life at a much faster pace than you are. And for now, that's all I'm going to say about it, because I'm probably going to make a video on it in depth sometime in the future, because there's surprisingly a lot to talk about considering its short runtime. The second season, Lazy in Space, I believe is currently complete, but its official release has been delayed multiple times. Currently, it's planned to be released on Netflix sometime in 2022. Monthly Girls Nozaki-kun, 9 out of 10. Monthly Girls Nozaki-kun is a comedy subversion of classic shoujo manga tropes. Nozaki-kun himself is the author of a shoujo manga, Let's Fall in Love. Chiyo Sakura has a major crush on him and ends up getting entangled working as his manga assistant along with several other students. The characters are this series' lifeblood, and Kashima, the school prince and actor of the drama club, is obviously my favorite. But the main cast are all hilarious in their own ways, and it's hard not to love these idiots. The dub and the sub are both great too. Chiyo's delivery is great in English and in Japanese, and it's actually kind of hard to choose between them.
Why is Mamiko, of all people, introducing me to the prince? How could she?
Literally, the only thing stopping this from being a 10 out of 10 is that there isn't really any plot progression or long-term character change, which, like I've said before, is a major drawback in the rom-com genre for me, even if it is satire. In the same way that the anime Ouran High School Host Club is a parody of harem genre tropes, Monthly Girls Nozaki is a parody of shoujo genre tropes. So if you're not at least passingly familiar with the tropes that are being subverted, your expectations and enjoyment of the series may not be as high. Mob Psycho 100, 10 out of 10. Yeah, okay, so the reason I didn't give One Punch Man a 10 out of 10 and the reason it's not on this list is because at the end of the day, One Punch Man is a gag comic, and the single department it is lacking in is heart, and Mob Psycho 100 has heart in spades. While both written by the webcomic artist named One, unlike One Punch Man, Mob Psycho 100 was adapted straight from his original webcomic, which was a smart move for a couple of reasons. While you can call One's work on Mob Psycho 100 rough, he's clearly improved massively from when he first started, and his simple style works incredibly well for both comedic purposes and also genuine moments of threatening horror. The simplified character designs and the rough, unfinished pencil lines also mean that the animators can go absolutely ham on the character animation, and we get things like Reagan speaking with his hands. Visually, the anime is such a treat because it uses several different animation styles and effects, such as this painted glass technique throughout the series and ending, which is animated entirely by Mio Sato. Plot-wise, Reigen Arataka is a phony psychic who is mentoring middle school student Shigeo Kageyama, nicknamed Mob, who despite being an extremely powerful esper, otherwise lacks confidence and is a shy, unobtrusive person. Due to an unfortunate complication of his powers, he's also become emotionally stunted. He bottles up his feelings in an attempt to minimize the damage his psychic powers can cause, but the thing about bottling is that it inevitably causes an explosion. Once Mob reaches his breaking point, which is helpfully measured by an on-screen counter, he ends up going berserk. But the thing about having ultimate cosmic powers is that it hasn't made Mob happy at all. It hasn't made him any friends, and apart from his powers, he's totally average. And because of this, Mob doesn't want to rely solely on his psychic powers. He wants to stand on his own 2 feet and the merit of his own efforts, and aspires to change and improve himself through hard work. It's actually fascinating how hard Mob Psycho 100 comes down on how unhealthy main character syndrome is, and the season finale is just, ooh! It does not pull any of its punches. I couldn't have asked for a better finale. Season 2 was also really good, and having finished the manga, I'm really looking forward to / hoping for an eventual final 3rd season. Sweetness and Lightning, 10 out of 10. Okay, so after the last entry, I feel like I just have to remind everyone that this is my biased as hell personal ranking system. If this were a conversation I was having with a stranger, I don't think I could manage to look another human being in the eye and say, yeah, I think that Sweetness and Lightning is as good as Mob Psycho 100, totally. But I just can't help it. This is the feeling in my heart, and it's full of love for both series for entirely different reasons. Reasons consisting of one of my favorite tropes ever when it's done right, lone wolf and cub. Or new single parent struggles to raise a rambunctious child on their own. Finding a good lone wolf and cub story is surprisingly hard because writers usually have a hard time finding the right balance of making the child character an actual child and not bratty to the point of annoyance or so angelically hollow that they're basically a prop. Tsumugi is great because she is adorable, but she's not perfect. She gets into fights, she throws tantrums, she has a clear personality and isn't just a plot device for her dad to have a character arc. Can you tell? I've seen a lot of this trope done really badly. The premise is her dad, Kohei, decides to learn how to cook, because cooking was something that was always handled by his wife, who unfortunately recently passed away. He ends up befriending one of his students, Kotori Ida, who, despite her mother running a restaurant, Kotori can't cook because she's afraid of knives, so they both decide to team up and learn how to cook together. And they do, and that's the anime. Okay, well, no, not quite. Sweetness and Lightning doesn't pull its punches when it comes to the grief of losing a loved one. The trope of fridging women, usually wives and mothers, as a plot device for another character's growth is a sticky and loaded one. But in this case, it's earned, because it's not something that is just glossed over. It comes up repeatedly over the course of the series. Tsumugi and her father are still grieving over their sudden loss, and neither of them quite know how to move forward. And it's heart-wrenching to see. And that's why this anime is so high on my ranking list, because Sweetness and Lightning is fun and heartwarming, and it will hurt you. Which, in hindsight, maybe should just be the motto of this channel. Because speaking of the pain train, Land of the Lustrous, Hoseki no Kuni, 10 out of 10. So, my first video on this channel was actually about Hoseki no Kuni, but that video is now old and the audio is real bad, and it was a character study, not a review. But I chose it as my first video for a couple of reasons. I made this channel because I love 2D animation because I love art. I love paintings and watercolors and pens and ink and digital drawings and just drawings. I love seeing an image someone drew with their hands come to life through animation. And 3D animation in comparison, though it can do incredible things like cinematic camera movements and hyperrealistic textures, it isn't the same, it's sculptural. Even with the advancements in technology, my preference is always going to be for 2D animation, which is why I'm still an anime fan, because anime is one of the few places where 2D animation is still being produced without being shoehorned into kids' entertainment or dark adult comedy. In the animation industry right now, the predominant use of CG animation is because it's cheaper and less labor-intensive, and not because it was a better medium for storytelling. And part of me is just so frustrated because the way CG is used in animation right now is really misguided. Why are we using animation to make a hyper-realistic mirror of reality? Reality exists. You could film in a location similar to this and accomplish the same effect. When the whole point of animation is that you can make something you couldn't accomplish in reality. Why would you limit yourself in a medium that virtually has no limits? And I'm not sorry, I'm really passionate about animation. So the whole reason that I bring this up is because Hoseki no Kuni is the only CG animation that I have ever seen where the people creating the adaptation, Studio Orange, decided to use the medium of 3D animation not as a monetary crutch, but because the medium would actually be able to tell a better story. Hoseki no Kuni takes place on a vast empty island surrounded by endless oceans. And the inhabitants of the island are the Lustrous, a humanoid species formed from gemstones. The Lustrous are ageless, genderless, and practically immortal. They can be broken, but as long as all of the pieces are recovered, they can be pieced back like nothing ever happened. Except that they are also being systematically hunted down by the Lunarians, another group of alien humanoid figures that dwell on the moon, and periodically descend to attack, shatter, and steal the precious gems that form the lustrous bodies. Out of all of the lustrous, Phosphorite is the youngest, only 300 and most brittle, only a 3.5 on the Moss hardness scale. Being either ill-suited or disinterested in any other jobs, Phos desperately wants to prove their value through combat. And that ends up really backfiring. The series is effectively a character study of Phos, their goal to change themselves and the consequences caused by that decision. Like a ripple in a still lake causing waves further and further from the shore of their origin. And all of this is wrapped under the underlying mystery of exactly what are the Lunarians, or the Gem People for that matter. Questions that, for right now and the foreseeable future, are locked in manga purgatory. Seeing as a second season hasn't been announced, and seeing as Studio Orange seems to be busy working on other projects. So, do you ever wonder what it would be like if Sanrio decided to make a comedy about how brutal the experience of toiling your life away under capitalism is? Just to live your life burned out of meaning and purpose, but you can still choose to find joy and happiness in the small things that you love despite that. Or maybe happiness isn't the right way to describe it and we're all just filling this void inside of us by numbing our senses to the real world through endless binging of content and rampant consumerism, or social media, or mobile games, because god damn it, life is hard and we deserve a little bit of escapism as a treat. But is a treat really something that you have every day just to fill your baseline status of feeling fine, or is that actually an unhealthy coping mechanism or borderline addiction? But seriously, Japan and also America are supposed to be major developed countries, so how are we still managing to treat the majority of our working class like they're disposable garbage that have to work multiple jobs just to pay rent, and we're part of a system that literally kills people through work-related stress and lack of sleep and lack of health care? And our work culture funnels all of our mental energy into work productivity. And for what? For what? For who? For this company? This company isn't making the world a better place. Its success is completely unrelated to the labor of the workers that it employs. And knowing all of that, we have to wake up every day and get on the train and go to work anyway, because it's not feasible to completely remove ourselves from the system we live in, except for a small percentage of the extremely privileged. And we all had to collectively look around at that and say, this is fine. So, that's what watching Aggretsuko scream her little death metal heart out about workplace bullshit is like. 9 out of 10. Just the right balance of comedy, nihilism, and absolute tender sincerity. Well, considering it's been almost 2 minutes since I talked about a Studio Orange production, on that note, BEASTARS, 10 out of 10. Yeah, okay, so BEASTARS is legitimately fantastic. So when adapting Hoseki no Kuni into a 3D anime, it was perfect for these identical alien body types that had an inorganic material such as gemstones for the hair, because realistic human hair is notoriously difficult to animate in CG. But BEASTAR's cast is made up of anthropomorphized animals, so not only was it impossible for them to reuse the same character body type for everyone, they also had wildly different face shapes as well. From a technical and design aspect, it's really cool. So BEASTARS uses animal allegory as commentary for how society casts people into different roles based on the assumptions of people's expectations of others, and how over time that can deeply affect an individual depending on how well or poorly they can either conform or perform to meet the expectations of their role. Theater and acting play a major part in the story for a reason, but one of the good things about BEASTAR's use of allegory is that, unlike Zootopia, which is real clear about what it's an allegory for,
but I don't want any trouble in here, so hit the road.
Go back to the forest, predator!
I'm from the savannah!
BEASTARS isn't specifically about any one socio-political issue, which is an important distinction to make when you create a society where part of the population will eat the other alive to survive. Jack Saint actually has a couple of videos where he talks about BEASTARS and goes into depth about the pros and cons when using animals as an allegory in storytelling. And his videos often touch on the relationship between society as a whole and then the individual. So in BEASTARS, despite building an integrated society, the current political system is broken as hell, simultaneously turning a blind eye to some crimes while also resorting to mass incarceration of convicted criminals and having seemingly no governmental structure focused on rehabilitation or reintegration back into society. The world building in BEASTARS is surprisingly rich, especially considering people think of it as the furry anime with the rabbit titties. So plot-wise, the story takes place at Cherryton Academy, which is a prestigious integrated school where there was recently a gruesome murder that befell one of the students who was presumably eaten alive. Oops. Did they shut down the school after a murder took place on campus grounds? No. No, they did not. That is the kind of world that BEASTARS is. And this has deeply affected 3 individuals, Legoshi, Louis, and Haru, by causing them all to kind of hate themselves. Our protagonist, Legoshi, is a gray wolf and also a mess of self-loathing. He tries to reject his carnivore nature because, despite the certain amount of privilege he's granted, he doesn't relish this fact, because it also makes people terrified of him. Carnivores are generally demonized by herbivores. Legoshi has mentally completely suppressed that part of himself. He slumps through the halls, he's soft-spoken and avoids conflict, which means that he is repressed as hell on the verge of a mental breakdown without even realizing it. When, out late one night, his hunting instincts kick in, and he ends up accidentally attacking another student. Louis, on the other hand, is the lead of the drama club, son of a major CEO, and is next in line to become the B-star. Louis hates his frail herbivore body and hides his insecurity and fear behind an aggressive, arrogant show of control. While he doesn't want to be a carnivore, he wants the respect and privilege that they are given. And Haru, a dwarf rabbit that's barely 3'5", who despises being infantilized by her peers, who when they look at her only see her fluffy, cute exterior and not her as a person. And she also uses casual sex as a coping mechanism to feel more powerful and in control of her life. Good for her. BEASTARS just candidly and unapologetically includes sex as a part of its story without ever actually being graphic about it. And that's honestly kind of refreshing. So, Haru is actually the person Legoshi accidentally attacked. And in a guilt-riddled attempt to try and apologize somehow and befriend her, he manages to fuck up so hard he accidentally falls in love with her like a fucking idiot. Legoshi is an absolute disaster, and I love him for it. For an anime that opens on a murder, the character relationships and how BEASTARS uses romance as a major fueling force for its plot is really nice, considering that romance is often put on the back burner for more action, shonen-oriented shows.
You fell in love? Maybe I'm in love. What? Are you serious?
I believe that Legoshi is in love, and that's not something I can say about a lot of romances. Netflix recently confirmed Season 2 will be released worldwide on July 15th, so that's cool, but it's also not something that I would watch in a communal space or in front of other people, because you're going to get some questions that you won't be able to answer. Also, I know I praise the anime a lot. That being said, Paru Itagaki's art it's a little off-putting at first, but there is a lot of charm and subtle expressions that are lost in the anime. And the manga is actually complete now, so if that's something you're interested in, I would definitely recommend checking it out. Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, 10 out of 10. Yes, I know, what a shock. I think Demon Slayer is great, just like literally every other person on the planet. Not very shocking considering that Demon Slayer the movie became Japan's biggest box office hit of all time, and pushed Spirited Away into second place. That's crazy. I really don't think there's too much I can add to the conversation about Demon Slayer that hasn't already been said, considering it's a new titan of the genre, but I just can't make a list of my favorite anime of the previous decade and then not talk about it. To simply summarize, man-eating demons have been plaguing Meiji-era Japan. And unfortunately for Kamado Tanjiro, his family have just become casualties. That is, except for his sister, who, even worse, has transformed into a man-eating demon. And Tanjiro has to join forces with an elite military task force in hopes of turning his sibling back into a human again. The thing that's great about Demon Slayer isn't the premise, which is such standard shonen fare. It's literally the same inciting incident and long-term goal as Fullmetal Alchemist. But rather, it's the execution and the way the story is told that makes Demon Slayer a standout. Tanjiro being the eldest sibling gives him a responsible nature and maturity that is otherwise lacking in the majority of shonen protagonists. It's not that your average shonen protagonist doesn't have empathy. They do, but their baseline is typically going to be some flavor of brash, confrontational, and generally a bit of a scamp. But the thing is, Tanjiro's baseline is being a kind, empathetic, non-confrontational, well-mannered person. And that, to me, is incredibly satisfying to see. Tanjiro doesn't have time for petty rivalries. He's going to put the needs of others before his own and get this shit done. To be clear, he makes a point to try and get along with everyone if possible, though he will still scold and throw hands if he needs to. And honestly, I just think he's a really good role model. While it is a shame that his sister Nezuko is muzzled, I like that being a demon means that in battle she is absolutely feral. She is as strong, if not stronger than her brother, and that's a really important quality to have in a battle anime, to have one's teammates on generally equal footing with each other. I know that for some fans, Nezuko being muzzled is a real drawback because it means that she doesn't have a lot of dialogue. But despite that, she's still really important and has some wonderful character moments that are conveyed through her actions instead of dialogue. When a character can't convey what they're feeling through words, it means that the audience has to put more of an effort into understanding what they're going through. She can't express her thoughts through words the way the other characters can, so you have to look at her actions instead to know what she's thinking and how she's feeling. Also, the fact that Nezuko's dialogue is almost entirely reserved to Tanjiro's flashbacks of when she was still a human really hammers home how becoming a demon has changed something deep within her fundamental core, Regardless of whether or not Nezuko can become a human again, both of them have been permanently altered by this experience. One of the things that's so refreshing is that the anime's pacing really takes its time establishing the main characters. We don't meet Tanjiro's traveling companions until 11 episodes in. That's practically a whole season's length of time focused on Tanjiro's character development. As a counterexample, by episode 11 of Naruto, he had already met his traveling companions and formed a group with them, fought Zabuza, and was practicing tree climbing in the Mist Village. That's wild! But in comparison, it's important because this means that the audience spends a lot of time with Tanjiro acting by himself. Tanjiro spends 2 years training on a mountain. 2 fucking years that we see, and we spend time with him, and we see him grow, and we're able to see who he is as a character and connect with him because of it. And this time in the beginning that we only spend on Tanjiro is so important for establishing the audience's connection with the protagonist, precisely because as the series progresses and more characters are inevitably introduced, there won't be as much time later to devote to a single character. So I don't think I can logically explain what it is about Demon Slayer that makes it great. My favorite scene happens in episode 5, where Tanjiro is coming home after being initiated as a Demon Slayer. And when he finally gets back, Nezuko is awake for the first time in a year. And when she sees him, he can barely walk, and he's covered in blood and grime. And she just instantly holds him, and the music swells, and all at once Tanjiro's relief causes everything that he was holding back to hit him all at once, and I'm not crying, you're crying. It's the relief. It's the tension breaking. It's the floodgates opening after holding everything back and holding yourself together and being strong for so long. And it's moments like these that make Demon Slayer really fucking special. Demon Slayer understands that high action needs to be followed by moments of relief. If you finish your arc of fighting demons and it almost kills you, you need a period of rest afterwards to show what these characters are like out of battle. Your audience needs to rest, and your characters need to rest. Well, this was certainly an interesting exercise homing in on my very specific taste. At least now when people call out my trash taste, they can do it accurately. What's your personal favorite from this era? Did it make it on the list, or was it not mentioned at all? I'm sure that 1 or 2 shows must have slipped through the cracks. I'm not sure if I'm going to do something like this again for the 1990s or the mid-2000s. Like, there was less anime being produced, so a 1990s list would legitimately just be a top 10 list. But I'm not sure I really want to revisit what was happening in the 2000s. Thank you so much to my patrons. This video was made possible through your support, and I couldn't have done it without you. Since this is my first video I've uploaded after launching my Patreon, I want to take a moment to celebrate with them. So I want to take a moment to actually read their names aloud instead of just listing them, which is how it'll normally be for videos in the future. Thank you to A True Fan, Michael Lipster, Red, JT Lewis, Shaso, Manthruruthil, Christine, Kevin R. Turner, Cavalry Weaver, Adam Nickel, Kate, Canine Play, Ali Omar, Meeserly, 3 Key Fighting 332, Gigi Potenkim, Rora Morasso, Nicholas Mizell, Anila Anuler, Amanda Comet, Revealing Storm, Naoto Serpentine, Smith Sweet. Thank you so much. Alright, I'm signing out, and I just want to let you know that everything's gonna be okay.